Thank you, everyone. So thank you so much for having me. Excited to be part of this fantastic panel and learning together from everyone this evening. So we're not short in terms of any publications, books, anything that you read nowadays in terms of digital on the importance of a high-performance culture. So a show of hands, who here has been introduced to high-performance culture or been put in the spotlight to facilitate that? Got quite a few. All right. So a couple months back, while cycling in Austin, Texas, I had one of my cycling companions ask me, what are the key elements in terms of a high-performance culture? And I thought long and hard on that 2-hour bike ride. And every pedal stroke, I started thinking about, what does it take? What have I experienced? What have I read? Who's influenced me? All the different leaders that have inspired me? And what has been my role as an HR leader? So tonight, in a very short period of time, as Kathy shared, 8 minutes, I'm going to give you as much as I can from that 2-hour thinking and what came top of mind for me. So when I think about high-performance culture, for me, it is the how you do the what, coupled with the why as well as the who. So this is like a vast canvas of double loops. Anybody here practice mind maps? We've got a few, Owen. So take a minute, close your eyes, and think about a mind map. Thinking about a high-performance culture, what would that center be for you? And those key influential branches that branch off in terms of a high-performance culture. What comes to mind for you? So on that bike ride, these were some of the areas that were coming top of mind for me. And I was thinking about the influences as well as how they connect. So there's a lot of double loops here. Now, when we think about why is it important to have a high-performance culture, what are your thoughts? Give me some shout-outs. Why is it important? Well, we have some dashboards the operations and finance track. What's on those dashboards? What comes to mind? Revenue, right? What else? Expenses. So we track some of the things like engagement, certainly new logos. We're looking at new clients, retention, right? Attracting and retaining our talent, and all these different components that we like to track on those dashboards. When we consider the who in terms of culture, who owns that piece of culture and creating that high-performance culture? Absolutely. So I believe it's the leadership. They are that linchpin and really instrumental in terms of that piece. And they do it by partnering really, really closely with all operations as well as talent. And when we think about the how and the what comes to mind there in terms of culture? So these are going to be the manifestations and the expressions of creating that high-performance culture. So if we take that, I think in pictures. So a bicycle wheel, for example. The cultural wheel, for me, these are a lot of the spokes within that wheel that double loop, and they're connected. And then, of course, in the hub, as you mentioned, the leaders being that fundamental hub. So when I think about leaders, of course, they set the tone and the direction, as we know. And, of course, subcultures come from how leaders nurture and lead their talent. So that brings us to, what is HR's role when we think about creating a high-performance culture? I got to experience this a couple of years ago when I was being led by a very dynamic leader, and we were getting ready to go through a couple of dynamic acquisitions. And this leader said to me, hey, can you really ponder what is HR's role? I really want us to start thinking about that. And I went away and I read and I asked a lot of questions. So when I think about HR's role, a couple of things come to mind. We are the advisors. We're the co-creators. We are the curators, the coaches. We design. We build. We're constantly thinking about how we get that right. Anything I've left off? We're implementators. I could go on forever, the multiple hats that we wear in supporting that. Now, as mentioned, the leadership are that linchpin in terms of shaping and sustaining culture. And all too often, I have heard time and time again, HR owns culture. Let's do a show of hand here. Who owns culture? Who is it? Is it leaders? Absolutely. All right. So when we think about leaders shaping that culture and sustaining that, I like to think about it in 3 different components. So we've got the area here in terms of understanding the current culture. And what we like to do is have a really exploratory overview of what's happened in terms of the change. Also start to really think about the leadership preferences, the leadership style, and the leadership philosophies, as well as the team dynamics and all the different components within that space so that we get a really good understanding of the current culture, the espoused values, a number of different elements that we can observe. Then we go ahead and we look at our strategic choices coupled with the environmental factors to consider that playing space. And then lastly, we take a look and we start to really frame that aspiration. So what is that cultural aspiration and how do we get there based upon the business realities? So I like to really stop and think about when we join an organization, what are these dynamics at play? But when we're trying to make a behavioral or change initiative, how do these play as well? So one might ask, if we've got a company culture with some contextual history where there's been a high degree of, say, punishing for mistakes, what happens in that arena? We probably have some really high quality standards occurring in that organization, but then we have probably not as ripe in terms of with innovation and creativity. And you can see that play out. So Whole Foods Market would be considered very purpose-driven, and you'll hear them talk about that. Whereas, say, Tesla is very much driven in terms of learning, creativity, and of course, the output of innovation. Now, if we take that process and we think about how might we create values within an organization, if there's an acquisition occurring, or it needs a shakeup due to the changes of the leadership, or a new startup. I'm not going to go into these in high detail for you, but these are some of the things I like to do. So when I referenced that leadership opportunity a couple years ago, I'm a huge fan of doing co-creating as well as crowdsourcing and getting those two knocked out right together. Then I move into the scenario where I really think about how to make this simple and sticky, coupled with relevant and very actionable. And then lastly, being very agile in terms of our change management and the key initiatives. That being said, these are some of my favorite gurus that I like to reference and stay abreast of whenever I'm going through a change initiative and that I love to follow in terms of culture. For those of you here in Austin, Texas, Cardigan Communications, I got the opportunity a couple weeks ago to meet Dr. Harold Hardaway, as well as Shannon Hernandez, and they're absolutely dynamite experts in this field. So this has been a lot of information in a very short period of time, and I hope it's been helpful. Thank you.